if you've got the scarcity mentality and you've got, Daddy Warbucks walking in and you know that you've got to make payroll and rent for the next 2 months and everybody's on summer vacation and nobody's here to fill the coffers. Hey, yes, sir. What do you need? What do you want to do? What do you think we should do here?
Welcome to the Enduring Church Podcast, hosted by Nathan Castleberry and Michael Davis, helping pastors grow their churches while equipping the body to love their neighbors. Yeah, their literal neighbors. Nathan and Jason, we're back. How y'all doing?
Well, hey, everybody.
Hey.
Who are you, Jason?
Who am I?
What is this third tile on my screen?
Third person. You're
Such
hearing.
an existential question.
That's right. Hey, I'm Jason Summers. I've been in ministry for 20 years, working with Crew and now Jesus Film Project. And I'll tell you more about that as we jump in today.
I like the confidence. He just jumped right in and introduced himself. Didn't even give us a chance to.
Everybody knows who you are.
How rude. A funny story. Jason is actually our first and second guest because we just had some audio difficulties, but I'm glad you're back, brother. I really do appreciate
if you're a Titanium subscriber, you can actually get access to the lost episode. So sign up, hit that like button, slap that bell.
It just sounds you might have to have some sort of audio decryption device.
That's fair.
Well, everyone, thank you for joining us for another episode of the Enduring Church Podcast. I am Michael Davis.
I'm Nathan Castleberry.
And
I'm Jason Summers.
Yes, we got that. We got that.
He's Jason Summers.
Today, we thought Jason was going to be a good resource because we're going to be talking about giving at church, and we're going to be talking about whether or not you're asking for money wrong, or is your church asking for money wrong. So I really do appreciate you joining us, Jason. We like to throw shade at you, but you're actually really good at this. So we appreciate your expertise in helping us with this.
Right. Yeah. So I'm in, just so everybody's clear, I'm in the major donor space within Jesus Film. Raised personal support for going on 20 years now. Again, all opinions expressed are my own and do not represent those of anyone else. Just leave it there.
We'll just make sure we edit that part out.
Whatever.
All right, and now I'm nervous for some reason.
Yeah, no, we're gonna be fine.
Jason, you didn't have that disclaimer last time we talked, so I guess he's got an axe to grind this time.
Thank you for checking out the Enduring Church Podcast on YouTube. If you could do us a favor, hit the subscribe button and the bell icon to make sure that you're aware whenever a new episode drops. Also, if you got some time, give us a thumbs up and also leave a comment. Really helps us with the algorithm. Well, now back to the show. Okay, here we go. So we're going to go for the first question, and I'm going to just tee it up to either one of you guys, or you guys can both answer it. But what would you say are the biggest mistakes churches make when talking about giving and how they impact generosity?
So I'll give a quick little tee up to you because I am not a fundraising expert. My lane is I'm a pastor shepherd, and tithes and offerings are how we keep the storehouse full to do ministry and whatnot. So I feel like it's more of a mindset that I see is problematic for fundraising within church circles. I'm sure there's something transferable and some things that don't really work in the ministry parachurch space that Jason can provide clarity on. But I think a lot of times we talk about money when we don't have enough, and so there's a little bit of a desperation, and so we do it as a paying the bill approach rather than a discipleship approach. Mm-hmm. So for me, like tithes and offerings, I don't even like to talk about it underneath the umbrella of generosity. I like to talk about tithes and offerings under the umbrella of this is like financial discipleship, financial stewardship. And then what you do on top of that could be maybe under the classification of generosity. So Jason, how does that tee you up?
No, that's good. I think, like you said, it can a lot of times come out of a scarcity mentality instead of an abundance mentality, right? I think, so my little background, my grandpa was a Baptist pastor for a long time. My father-in-law was a Baptist pastor for a long time. So I've been up close and personal with the ins and outs of church life, of tithes and offerings, and the way that impacts everything, right, within the family, um, a pastor's family. And yeah, I think that there are times where this topic can be brought up. I think you guys, the last episode I listened to was what do you do if your church turns against you? So I am also a listener and subscriber.
Oh.
Aw.
Um, and one of the things I think, Michael, you said in that was, if Nathan does a sermon series on generosity, oh well, he's just looking for more money, or oh, the church must not be doing well, right? And so I think that a couple things is not making it a regular topic, and it feeling more, oh man, we haven't talked about this in years. What's going on? Where's this? What's prompting this? Um, but I think even from the pastoral side, there can be times where it's like, hey, we need to get this out in front of the people because we need to let them know. Maybe there is a real reason for that, but it's from that scarcity place. Psalm 50 talks about, God owning the cattle on the thousand hills, and a mentor of mine years ago would be like, and he also owns the thousand hills. Like,
Yep.
and if you can move, and it's not just pastors, it's not just church staff, but it's the people sitting in the pews. Like, if we can move from that scarcity mentality in every aspect of life into this abundance mentality, that it's all the Lord's and we're stewarding it well. Um, but you can't fake it, right? You can't fake it up front. You can't fake it sitting in the pews or in the seats at church either. You've really got to find a place where you can move into living out of an abundance mentality.
Yeah, I think it's also not being scared to actually talk about theology of giving. It's I think one of the most interesting things, and I've been to churches all over the place, how rarely the senior pastor is actually the person who makes the ask. Like, it's almost like this is not necessarily it's beneath me, but it's like I'm going to cue it up to the executive pastor. Or I'm going to cue this up to the worship pastor or whatever. But it's almost like, but the truth is that you said this, right? Everything is owned by God, right? Everything we receive is from God. And when we don't see the theology of giving is literally just trusting the Lord with what we've got, and the fact that we are stewards of the resources that he gave us, it's not just addressing the scarcity mindset. It's the fact that you deserve absolutely nothing. This is a conversation I have with my kids all the time when they whine. I said, you're whining because you assume that you deserve this, or this is something that you're owed. Nothing that we are given is because of ourselves. Everything we have is a gift from God. So giving should be just we should be giving with a joyful heart because we have our daily bread. But I think the problem is that you're right, that it's distasteful. And I see this all the time when I'm dealing with ministries, when we're talking about donor communications. It's like, this is like the icky part. This is literally a way that believers who are indwelt with the Spirit can actually worship God by their giving, by being joyful givers. But we never talk about it that way.
So I think everything you just said is 100% right. But I also think it's one of those things where in all forms of communication, specifically as it relates to talking about financial stewardship, generosity, all these things, the chastisement tonality
Agreed.
doesn't usually lean into cheerful giving, like, oh, I'm such a wretch, I don't deserve this, here's all my money. Like, even Paul uses language about, like, you sow sparingly, you reap sparingly. You sow abundantly, you reap abundantly. So again, not to go like health, wealth, prosperity, but I do think there is some language in Scripture that does speak to the benefit of giving. Like, we're so much so that
sure.
You'd almost be foolish not to give. I mean, it's more blessed to give than receive, and so that's some of the language that I try to use around, like, trying to just fan the flame. Is like, hey, come and see what it feels like to know that God has got your back financially. Come and see what it feels like to know that your finances are under the umbrella of His protection. So again, theologically 100% correct. And I do think
I
Well,
agree.
and I know we're paraphrasing everything for a podcast, but just speaking to the pastor out there, when I know how easy it is sometimes to, out of a holy discontent or a sense of frustration, just to kind of want to, shift that gear into like, you know what, I'm gonna go Elijah mode and tell everybody how much of a wretch they are. I get it, because it's like, we're not paying the bills. Like, why is anybody? But I think, again, we have to pace ourselves, slow ourselves down, search the scripture for the words, because I do think the word of God really incentivizes generosity, like big time.
And hear me out. When I'm saying this, I'm not saying this is the message you should preach. I'm saying that, like, if we continuously tell our congregation and the people that are under us, whether it's our families or whether it's the church members that you're pastoring, that it's like, again, it's not like you're a wretch and that you shouldn't be doing this and that you should give away everything and we should have all in common, right? Because that is the standard. I'm just saying is that, like, when and again, this is not solely a sermon on giving, right? This is a heart posture of saying that this nothing that I have is from me. It is all a gift. And again, you don't even need to talk about giving in that context all the time. I'm just saying is that I think for a lot of folks, and we've had this discussion regarding consumerism, right? They're there to see what they can receive, when the Christian life is about being sacrificial. It's about, okay, go ahead, Jason.
Well, I mean, going along with that, and this kind of gets into, I think I'm gonna lead us into the next question.
Okay. That's
Thinking
my
about,
job, by the way.
Well, okay.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Thinking
Jason,
about
let's let you be the host today.
Thinking about ways that you can create a culture of generosity, right,
Yeah.
without pressuring people, without making them feel guilty.
Yep.
I think what you said kind of touches on that, and for me, it's like, maybe this is the first hot take of the day. Here we are.
Here we go. Let's go.
I'm so ready.
I think that tithing. Okay, here we go.
Bring it on.
I think that tithing, generosity, can be to the big C church, right?
Yeah.
Now, I agree with, and I understand that there is a commitment to the local church, the body that you are connected to, that you are, growing, receiving, investing in, totally. So I think that in order to create that culture within your own local church, how can you make your place like, give people a compelling reason to invest there?
Yeah.
Right? How is the church stewarding their resources? What kind of returns are you all seeing? What's the impact in the community or around the world that you're making? What other ministries is your local church able to invest in as a result of the generosity of the people attending there?
Yeah.
Because
That's really
there are thousands and tens and hundreds of thousands of different ministries all over the world that are broad or super narrow in the impact that they're making, that's all helping to expand the kingdom of God, right? And the local church is a part of that, absolutely. And so how can you make your local church, and I guess I'm talking to pastors, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
How can you make your place somewhere that people would want to invest the resources that God's given them to steward? When they can go to humanitarian ministry, they can go to a evangelism ministry, they can go to whatever other bent that God has put on them in order to have affinity towards. How can you provide those things? How can you show the way that you're helping to enable the entire body of Christ through the local church? I think that's my rub. And I'm not just saying that as like a, ministry development guy going, hey, I think it's fine for y'all to tithe here. I want people to invest in their local church, but I think that ministries can do a good job of showcasing the impact and the reasons for investment. And I think that there's there's a bit that the local church can miss on that because there's so much else going on.
Yeah, it's you're nailed on the head, man. Like I do think one way you can see more first time givers is showing people because again let's talk about the psychology of the average giving unit on a Sunday morning.
Giving you, that's my favorite way to talk about this.
Right?
Giving
Yeah,
units.
I know. I don't love it, but I think you'll see where I'm going here. The reason I say that is because I think people on Sunday mornings don't necessarily always differentiate this charitable donation from a church to a nonprofit to a missionary to or whatever. For them, it's all just categorized in their mind as charitable giving. And so just if we're supposed to be fishers of men, we need to know how to like bait the hook, right? And so if we're trying to get them to bite the hook of generosity, I think people these days are a little more programmed to cause related type things than they are just bringing money to the storehouse. And especially if your storehouse isn't doing a great job of connecting the dots to tithes and offerings equals life changed for eternity. Tithes and offerings equals mission trips being funded. Tithes and offerings means widows and orphans being cared for. So if we don't do a good job of sharing that vision and celebrating the wins, maybe a starting point is just that there. Hey, when you give here are the different ministries that we support. When you give here are the missionaries that are empowered and equipped to do their work. Like your money isn't just getting isn't just getting treats and little Debbie snacks for the kids. So I think that helps stirs the pot a little bit. But another thing that I've seen, and this requires pastors to step away from scarcity mentality and start thinking that God really does have all the resources. What I've seen is when we do one-off like special like cause related love offerings for a missionary or for one of our strategic partnerships, we always see a spike in tithes and offerings in the coming quarter. It's just funny how we talk about generosity personally, but we don't always think about generosity corporately with with the money that God is entrusting us as an organization. And I just think that people are drawn to that. And so whenever a few times a year you just have a couple little on ramps, you're not going to lose money. Like God's not going to punish you for supporting Jesus film, which is carrying out the Great Commission. God will honor that. He wants to show up and be proven faithful if we will put him to the test, not just personally, but organizationally as well.
It's interesting. One of the things that when I'm working with ministries, but it's funny, I didn't think about how this could be relevant for the local church. And this actually maybe we'll go into the third question. Transparency is key. When we're dealing with major givers, people who are giving like $100,000, $1 million, they want to know how their money is spent. But we forget about the widow's gift, right? She's giving. Oftentimes, the people who are supporting our church are giving at a more sacrificial rate than maybe someone who is incredibly wealthy. But when we give, we want to know the impact of it. Just like when we pray, we want to see the impact of it. We just don't want to pray for someone and then never hear about it. We want to see God working in it. So it's interesting. I never put two and two together, but are we doing a good job of really showing how God is using the resources that we're, whether it's in our local, area or whether it's with our partners? Are we actually telling people this is literally the life change that has been done because of your sacrificial giving? Rather than always talking about how the need is super important, why don't we say, hey, we supported Serve, which is a really great organization. They had a cool event, or they handed out food, and we saw 10 people come to faith. Inject that into me. That is awesome. And we say, okay, yeah, we wrote a check for $50, whatever. But our corporate workings together, us collaborating together, putting on this event, means that we have 10 more people who are going to be spending an eternity in the presence of God. That is stinking awesome. And I think it's just as relevant for churches as it is for ministries.
And I know, Nathan, that you love rhyming things, alliteration and all that.
He's Baptist. Of course he is.
Right. So one of the, I had a pastor that would say, we get a fraction of the action. So that's a good one. right? So
That's good. I
when
just
you
felt
would
the
invest
spirit.
as a church, when you would invest as, as a congregant into whatever these initiatives are, locally around the world, whatever, you get a fraction of the action. You've got skin in the game in that.
Yeah.
So that was one. I thought of you when that came to mind. I was like, Nathan's gonna love this.
I'm actually just, my wheels are now turning like, could I weave that into something this Sunday?
There you go. Yeah, I have a feeling that you just do this podcast for like sermon prep, and that's okay. We're
That's fine.
completely
My
fine.
gosh. So 2 shots have been fired at me in less than 2 minutes. First of all, I am former Baptist, and I've got a lot of Baptist friends. Nothing against it. I'm just true non-denom now. Second
Okay.
of all, listen, I'm teaching on Genesis 5 Enoch this Sunday. So
Okay.
there's no generosity talks there.
So let's actually talk about the role of transparency, right? It's not just necessarily always about the impact. People want to, it's one of the things that's interesting about like old school Baptists, like, when you're having your meetings and you're going over the budgets and people vote on it. It's kind of, that's a level of transparency that I don't think a lot of churches are doing anymore. But how do you guys view that level? I mean, even like, this is how much we spend on security. This is how much we spent on bills. Like, how do you guys think of that helping or hurting?
So, a church that we used to go to, we lived in Missouri. The church there I don't remember we used to do like a Wednesday night twice a month, and that was for like, we called it Community Live, and it was for the core, attenders, kind of like old school Wednesday night, Baptist church service. But it wasn't the outreach Sunday morning, y'all come kind of thing. And I don't remember if it was there or if it was actually on a Sunday morning, but the pastor brought out one of those little, the little bill things like from the restaurant, the little black pork, whatever. And basically said, for a family of 4, it costs $47.26 per weekend. But it was a way, you're like, Michael's like rolling his eyes for you who aren't watching us. But there's a sense of going, hey, we want you to know that we value caring for you and your family over the weekend. And this is it. This is transparency. This is what it costs us to do that. We average X amount of people every weekend. This is our weekly burn rate. He said it nicer than that, right? But so here, this is just brass tacks. This is what it is. So if you're giving less than that, that's fine. We're glad that you're here. And if you're giving more than that, thank you, because you're able to
Support
allow
those
us
who
to
can't give
continue to
as
serve
much.
more
Yeah.
people, right?
Yep.
And I think that there's a business sense that, not you, Nathan, obviously. We've talked about how you're perfect. We'll hear that on most of these. But
We got it all figured out.
There can be a business sense that's lacking, and it feels like the grace and truth kind of thing. Like the grace side is like heavy ministry, like this will all work out, and then the truth side is the business side, and those can be like opposed at times, right? But Jesus lived both of those things out. My dad, the church he used to go to, he was meeting with the pastor there, and they were like, man, we're trying to figure out if we should, we're meeting in a school right now. We're trying to figure out if we should build or if we should go somewhere else. We're just really waiting on a sign. And my dad was like, well, what's been going on? And he goes, well, the school just tripled their rent for us, and we're just trying to decide if that's, and my dad's like, businessman, hey, what other sign are you looking for? They tripled your rent. What else do you need to know that this isn't the place to stay? But it's because you can be in a sense of trusting the Lord, waiting on Him, wanting things, and we can over spiritualize, and you can over spiritualize in a business sense. And I think it's helpful to have somebody to help balance that and go, hey, here's another perspective on it. Because again, it's all about stewardship, right? Whether it's the people sitting in the church rows that are, as you're passing the plate or signing up to, give auto draft, or if it's the church on the other side stewarding those resources, there's a responsibility on both sides. And so to be at a place where you're willing to be transparent with what's going on, can be terrifying.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
So
well, and here's the other thing: when you are there's so many vantage points to get, and metrics that people are looking at with when they say they want to know how the money is being spent. To
Yeah.
somebody who's barely making ends meet, they would probably look at my salary and think that I'm grossly overpaid. To somebody who owns their own business, has got multiple streams of income, and knows what it's like to kind of be the guy who the buck stops with, they think I'm grossly underpaid.
Yeah.
mhm.
No, that's right.
You know, and so it's this, like, so much of this is very subjective. For me, what I've found is what we do is we, on our the giving portion of our website, you know, we give a like a graphic for the year's budget that just kind of shows what is administrative, personnel, operation, what is ministry, you know, what are all those big bucket items, so they can just know out of the, you know, we're a 3 church family, so out of the almost 7 million that we've budgeted for, here's how all that gets broken down in macro. And if people want to meet with us individually to break that down further, we certainly will. um, I find that at our membership classes, I go a little bit uh, greater specificity, not about necessarily exactly what the numbers are. If people want to know that, I've got no problem telling them how what our rent is, and at the
Yeah.
mill, which is not cheap, and all, and why we have subtenant income and all those things. But when I talk about the fact that we've got a board of directors that's laity, and their primary function is, you know, fiduciary governance, making sure that we aren't doing stupid decisions. We talk about that we've got an external accounting firm that's handling all of our bookkeeping, and with that accounting firm, we have a fractional CFO, an outside voice that can throw a penalty flag on any of us. He's not beholden to any of us as lead pastors. So
Yeah.
I find that when we show them some of the checks and balances that we've got in place, they're not necessarily concerned about, well, what's the ministry bucket compared to the operational bucket, and why is the operational bucket so high? Well, you know, like, I think they see we're trying to lower that operational bucket by getting rental income, and here's so anyway, for me, authenticity and transparency, you know, they mean different things. Transparency, I think sometimes you might, in a desire to be transparency, show people how the sausage is made, and it might turn them off a little
Yeah.
bit. But authenticity, you know, like, hey, I've got an open book. Here's what I think you probably want to see, and if you want to drill down deeper, I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, and this is where candor comes in, right? This is like, some people might be confused as to why we're spending a certain amount of money on certain things, because maybe they just don't have the context of what things cost these days. So it's not like, you know, transparency and that would, you know, with the hope that all of a sudden people are going to be upset, and then you're asking for having a bunch of conversations where people are, it's like, explain yourself. It's more of like, do they believe that you have a heart to steward the resources that God has given them and that they have given to the local church or the ministries that you're supporting? And again, this is again, you don't want to say this from you know, the pulpit, but like, what is the return on their investment? You know, this isn't necessarily like we're spending this in order to get, you know, are you getting a fraction of the action? And, you know, I'm going to rip you off on that.
We need a piano in the background next time that word is used.
That's right. I'll add it in post. But again, people just want to know that the money that they're spending is being used well. I heard a story recently where a pastor came in and was given a house which belonged to the church, and then and it was really close to the church, and again, we're cool with that. And then all of a sudden, he decided he wanted a bigger house because he wanted to entertain more, or all this stuff. And then it ended up having I think it was like a $1.5 million house with a relatively small church. And then
it's on the books as a campus.
Yeah,
it's on the asset sheet as a campus.
Yeah, probably. But it was one of those things, and he started getting paid an obscene amount of money, and there was a lack of transparency. I think if the people in your pews or in your rows, as Jason said, believe that you have the best of intentions, and that you believe that the funds that God has given you through them is that stewardship is really, really important to you, then it's not necessarily going to be like hey, explain this line item to me. It's going to be more of like, the totality of it, and that we're spending this well, and that we're seeing fruit from this resource.
And I think that there's an aspect of, and I like how you said authenticity. I think that's probably the right way to think about it. And I think there's how can you keep people informed on decisions that are being made? Not bringing it to a vote, not but so that your regular attendees aren't surprised when you all say, "Hey, we're gonna sponsor the carrying closet at the local high school," right? Or we're partnering with this ministry that's making an impact here. How can what are ways that you can keep them on the front side of a lot of these decisions or investments that the church should be making, as opposed to coming out in like the year-end review and going, "Oh, we gave to that. That's why. That seems weird. I had no idea." Um, and again, not that you need to be at a place where everybody sees how the sausage is made. Not that you need input on all of those things, but I think keeping people informed um, about new partnerships, about new initiatives, and some of the reasons behind it. We've seen the impact that these guys do. We're excited to expand our reach in this area. Helps them feel like, again, going back to how can you give people a compelling reason to invest? Like, I mean, they're always finding somebody else to partner with that's doing stuff well. That's what I want to keep giving to that.
And I think that's a big component that I don't know that a lot of churches understand is we spend a tremendous amount of energy trying to do things that ministries like Jesus Film and pantries in your area, like while it is a good thing that food ministry is important, church planting is important, prison ministry is important. I mean, you know what I mean? Like there's a million things that we could identify as important. And Jesus was like, "Hey, when you visited me in prison and when you helped me when I'm sick," like all these acts of ministry beyond the four walls of Sunday morning church and all those sort of things, they matter greatly. But I think a lot of churches just try to figure out how to do it all themselves. They end up doing a lot of things mediocre, and it's hard to have a great impact report on. Yeah, well, we did this and a couple of people showed up. We did this and a couple of people showed up. Versus, hey, we're working with a food organization that is doing millions of meals around the world, and they can directly correlate it to this many thousands of people that are coming to know Jesus. So I think, as somebody say a long time ago, partner, don't pioneer. And so when you again, when you talk about, hey, here's why we don't do a food pantry, because we partner with him. Here's why we aren't doing, we don't do as many mission trips as we did pre-COVID, because we just started really wrestling with what was a mission trip in the Bible.
Ooh, that's another one I'll come back for. We'll do another one on mission trips. All right.
Did Paul go and dig wells and plant schools, or did he plant churches? And so we've shifted a lot of our missions budget to supporting church planters in the 1040 window, right? And so being able to connect the dots that, tithes and offerings and bringing your finances here is helping fulfill the Great Commission. And it's not that we're doing it ourselves, but here are the organizations that are doing it. And by the way, you should pray about becoming a supporter of them too.
Yeah. It's interesting because I actually believe that giving through the local church, and I donate to multiple causes directly, but I think that if I knew that my church is supporting the things that I care about through my giving, I think that the local church being the conduit and almost doing like the due diligence for me, saying that I know that, like, if I'm going to give to serve, I know that they've done the due diligence in regards to how much money is going to go directly to being the hands and feet of Jesus and to sharing the gospel with those who need him. Like that's a very helpful thing for me. But again, this goes back to the transparency and giving praise when it's necessary. But I love what you said. This is all over. Again, if this was a business, we'd all be talking about this is the return on investment. If I am investing, $1,000 in creating like a barbecue for neighbors, that could have a really good return on investment.
But if I give $1,000, then that actually plants a church in Malawi where, like, you know, in an unreached place, that could have a different return on investment and that could have a big impact. But I think that, again, as long as we're communicating what we're doing with those resources, I think that is super helpful. Now, I do want to talk about something because we're not running out of time, but I want to make sure that we're talking about this, especially considering your background. Let's talk about how churches should approach major givers, right? Like the big families, the ones that, and we talked about this in the episode about what happens if the church goes against you. There are families that have a lot of money and that are oftentimes, I'm trying to think of the word, maybe wooed by churches where they'll have access where other people don't because of the amount of money. So how should local churches and maybe even ministries, let's talk about that as well, how should they approach major givers as compared to the widow giving her last copper?
Should I give my disclaimer again? Is this
Yes,
a good
yes,
time
go,
to
yeah,
give it again?
yeah,
Bring
yeah,
it on.
Yeah, give your disclaimer again.
I mean, this is the trick, right? What do we do here? And I as I've thought about this, and try to figure out a way to really capture how I try to do this. You know, if you've got somebody in your church that's really gifted in music, right? You want to find a way that they can contribute, you know, on Sunday morning. You want to get them behind a microphone. You want to get them, you know, on guitar, on the keyboard, whatever it is, right? Because that's a gift that they have. I think that there are people. I know that there are people in every church around the country, around the world, that have the gift of generosity.
Yeah.
They need an outlet for that, and it is stewarding their giftings to be able to give. People can do that at a big rate. If everybody was a missionary, we'd all be poor and hungry, right? I mean, we need people that are, and I hate calling it like the secular world or like the business. I mean, it's just like we need people that are good at business. We need people that know how to make money. And I think especially in context of the global church, I think like that's what the US is good at, is making money. And I think our part, this is a little side sermonette, but I think that the role of the American church in the global, you know, scheme of things is to fund the Great Commission. I don't think it's us going places. And so as it, you know, bring that back home in your local church, if you've got somebody that's giving significantly, right? And whatever that means for you, is that usually you can look at your donors and see kind of a break point. We're like, here's where the number really drops. So maybe that's $10,000 a year, maybe that's $30,000 a year and above that people are giving. But those people, and this is where I really wrestle with it, because I don't want it to feel like we're giving them special attention or they get additional access or influence within the church. But I think they've got a more significant investment in what's going on. And I think it's honoring to them to bring them into conversations. I think it's honoring to them to get, you know, time with church staff or behind the scenes. It can get gross really quick, because then it gets political, and then it's like, hey, actually, money's not a tool. Money's just liquid influence, and I can get things done that I want to because I've got a whole bunch of it, you know. And I think that's the part to really safeguard. Again, going back to what we talked about at the beginning, the scarcity versus the abundance mentality. If you've got the scarcity mentality and you've got, you know, Daddy Warbucks walking in, and you know that you've got to make payroll and rent for the next 2 months, and everybody's on summer vacation and nobody's here to fill the coffers. Hey, yes, sir. What do you need? What do you want to do? What do you think we should do here? That's hard. And I think that's where, you know, maybe it's the pastor, maybe it's an executive pastor. I don't know the person church to church that would do it, but I think there's an aspect of discipleship that you can engage with these people that have more resources. I think it's a helping them to find ways to steward the gifts that they have, right? Whether it's within the church or outside of it. But seeing this as a tool, seeing this as a ministry opportunity to disciple them. Because when you have money, there's like a pull on your soul to want more of it, right? When you don't have
Yep.
any, you still have that. But it's how can you help people separate that pull that money can have on their soul? And I think that's hard work. And that takes time, that takes trust, right? That they see that you care about them separate from the check that they can write.
Yeah, they're not just an ATM. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. You know, the interesting thing is like, so I'll say this. I don't know what the top 10 highest givers in my congregation give numerically. I know who those families are. And when I meet with them, we aren't really, it's not donor development, it's pastoring, you know? So I think using that word discipleship a lot is a big deal. I will say this, and I know I've got a lot of friends in the capital campaign space that work for organizations like Generis, and they've got literally an amazing playbook. And so I'm gonna those specialized like campaigns. We can talk about those above and beyond, you know, year-end giving or fundraising efforts. I'm just talking about the everyday tithes and offerings. I find that a lot of those people that are giving bigger dollar amounts, they are already giving in lots of other places too. And so those conversations, if they are wanting to talk about giving, they're usually letting me know some of the organizations they support. They're asking recommendations. What are some other organizations? Like the people who really have caught the fever of generosity, like they can't really help but to give. Like they love it. And so being able to not have that scarcity mentality and make recommendations about the way they're giving will not benefit the church, it seems to boomerang back to the church. And to me, I think it all has to do with that. What posture are we approaching these conversations with? This is not my tither, and these are not my tithes. These are not my people. All of this belongs to God. They belong to God. Their resources belong to God. And I've been given a voice of influence to maybe help shape where some of these resources get funneled and whatnot. But again, I think you brought up such a great perspective, Jason. Like this is their particular gift. And so we're going to steward that gift the same way we would steward any other gift of talent, gift of time, gift of availability, gift of effort, gift of energy. And it just looks different. It looks different with each conversation, with each family, with knowing how they're wired. And here's the other thing: it's a little bit tricky about major donors if we're using that language. A lot of them, and again, this is all depends on if you're a literal hardliner tither or not. Most of them aren't even really doing like a true tithe, anyways, to like one local church. But maybe if you approach the bigger like capital C church, like Jason was talking about, maybe that moves the needle a little closer to 10%. But I would love to see a church that puts as much work into like new givers, first time givers, not just milking the top 10 givers for more. And that's one of my like issues of tension with a lot of the capital campaigns. And I'm not opposed to the leaders going first. So whoever's in like some sort of financial lead gift capacity, I'm not opposed to that strategy at all. I've seen it be fruitful. When we moved in, we brought core families into the building at first to kind of see what it's going to take to outfit it. But in those core families, it wasn't just core giving families. It wasn't just people of means. It was people who weren't going to write a big check, but are incredibly bought in. They're just as much vision carriers giving a few $100s as compared to the ones who are giving, 5-6 figures, right? Like, even in some ways, maybe even more so. They're the ones who are maybe showing up every week, setting up signs and pouring coffee. So I think having a little bit broader category for generosity helps shape this conversation and maybe keeps us out of preferential treatment to the ones who can stroke the big check.
No, exactly. And if you think about how much, you're dealing with like your volunteers that show up every single week and are there for several hours, the amount of investment that oftentimes these people put if let's say you put a dollar amount to it is actually potentially could be higher than those who are writing checks every single week. But I will say, and going back to what you were talking about, which or Jason, um, having like seeing what giving can do, especially when it's transformational giving, like when someone, one of the best major giving officers I ever met actually said something that kind of stuck with me. It's like people who give or major givers want to see major impact. They like when when what they're doing has a substantial impact on the mission and on the outcome of that mission. And I think that that is how you know that it's spirit and wealth giving, when it's like the money becomes secondary, where the impact is all that the person cares about. And I think we've all seen this, right? Where there's a church plant in Montana and like Butte or whatever, and like you're like, I want to cover the rent for the year, and like you understand how much of an impact that can be for the local church in that area, and how that could for them it could be like, this is like, I spend this on like a half a week for vacation. But what you do is you say that this is like kingdom impact in an extent, and you actually can see like like almost like a joy that comes out of it. And this is what joyful giving comes. And again, this is, to your point, this is a level of discipleship, because you're not like seeking, how can I make more money so that I can get another boat? It's like, how can I make more money so that the kingdom can expand, and that I can use the giftings that I have, and that this is literally what I've been placed on this planet. We are to be the hands and feet of Jesus, and we are to make him known. And this is the way that I can do it. But there is a personal benefit to it. They get to see the response and the impact of it. But again, this is where I think transparency can really helpful. But I will say that the more they give, especially when you're dealing with like really, really high net families, and maybe this is external to the local church, sometimes like there is an expectation of like transparency that's almost like, this is VC, right? This is venture capital, and I need you to report on it. That's when things can get a little bit out of hand.
So, a little tip on that: I found a lot of times when you are in some sort of fundraising mode, you might actually get surprised financially if you're not always asking for money. So, and sometimes those conversations, and we're embarking on a special initiative, I will talk to one of these families and say, hey, here's what I'm thinking about with this. Here's what we're looking at, say it's a building campaign or whatever. And a lot of times you just ask for, hey, what do you see that you got fresh eyes? You run a business. Like, oftentimes when I invite them into perspective, resources follow that. That doesn't mean I'm giving them a vote or they've got some sort of authority, but just, I think they sometimes will feel a sense of peace knowing that they were able to maybe help have a voice in shaping this and using their business insights to maybe find a blind spot for me. And so that a lot of times you might think what you need is the resources, and you might get, a small check if you're asking for money, because you're probably one of several people asking these people for money.
Yep.
But what I find is seldom are they invited to weigh in just for the sake of perspective, wisdom, discernment, and oftentimes they will actually feel like, okay, there's humility there. These guys are open to feedback, and that gives them a greater sense of peace, knowing that these guys aren't just improving and throwing a dart on a wall, and like they can help shape it. And I think that's another way to do some development. Is not who is it? I think Lencioni. Not everybody has a vote, but give people a voice, and they get some buy-in that way.
I think I've had this exact conversation with you, Jason, where you're like, a lot of the time these people would the benefit of asking for their advice will almost always include funding as well.
Yeah, but you still have to ask them. So that's the other piece, right?
Yeah.
Like, as you're going on, and I don't want to get into like campaigns and all that stuff, but I think we can hint a lot, and we can ask for advice, and oh, here's what it's going to cost, and on. But like, people need that direct ask, and I think that's one of the most challenging pieces. I think, especially for a pastor in more of a leadership role with their people, one-on-one in a small group setting, you still have to be at a place to actually make an ask instead of just hinting at it, and holy hinting, or whatever we want to call it.
Yeah.
But I mean, and a lot of what you guys said, I mean, it's dead on. I think one of the things that I've heard and learned is people give to people that they know, love, and trust, right?
Yeah.
And so, what better place than the local church, right? They know them, they love them. Let's make sure that they trust them too. And that's what we've talked about with transparency and authenticity too. But I think there's such a heart connection that people should have to the local church, that it's a natural place that they would want to invest. And then Nathan, what you're talking about too, bringing people in and saying, hey, you've got fresh eyes. There's the LIFE acronym, LIFE, leadership, influence, finances, and expertise, right? That's how people like to be approached, right? It's not just the finances part. It's not just the influence part, but it's leadership, it's expertise that they would have as well, because they're a whole person. They have more to them than a checkbook. They have more to them than a bank account. They have, typically people that are in this major donor space have significant expertise and leadership skills, community influence that can help if you're stuck waiting on a contractor or waiting on a permit for something. They can go, hey, let me just call him, he's my neighbor, I'll get him over here tomorrow. Perfect. Thank you, Lord, for that. Right? I mean, seriously, and it sounds silly and trivial, but it's things like that people have the place to influence, like we're saying.
Awesome.
Amen.
So
Well,
I have
go
an
ahead.
encouragement thing to
Oh,
leave.
there we go, because we always end with an encouragement. Go ahead.
Do.
I'm sure our listeners can endure a little more.
Oh, stop it.
There it is. We didn't have one yet. We needed to get one in. So I think that it's pretty normal for churches to do, like the volunteer lunch or kind of a volunteer celebration time, right? Where they get the people that have maybe have the flexibility through stage of life or other circumstances. They can come and, help. They're putting up cones in the parking lot. They're setting up signs. They're greeting people at the door, and you want to do a big celebration for those. I would encourage you, whoever you are, listener out there, to do a celebration event with some of your top donors and thank them well for the investment that they're making in the local church. Give them a little bit of behind the scenes, here's what's going on, share some of the struggles, and make an ask there. Have a reason for them to be there. People that are in this space, and typically it's not pastors, typically it's not missionaries, that end up being the major donors at a table somewhere. But people are expecting an ask a lot of the times, and it's okay and it's appropriate to do. And have a compelling story to share with them and say, hey, this is where we want to take the church in the next 3 years, or this is a new initiative that we want to undertake, and we'd love for this group that's here to help underwrite it. They like you. If they showed up to the dinner, they can go buy a dinner somewhere else. They're there because they want to spend time with you and they want to hear what's going on in the church. And don't miss out on that.
Amen.
Amen.
Okay, I'm actually formulating something that is very parallel to that. So I feel very affirmed right now. Thank you, Jason.
Absolutely.
Nice. Well, listen, thank you guys for joining me, and this was a really great conversation. Thank you all for, thank you for the listening, and we'll catch you guys in a couple. I can't even speak right now, but thank you guys so much, and we'll see you guys in a couple weeks.
Adios.
This has been the Enduring Church Podcast with Nathan Castleberry and Michael Davis. We'll see you next time.